Hello everybody and welcome to VFR. Today we are back with our trusty Milviz Cessna 310R. Well, we're going to be doing a quick VFR check ride, just going through everything that you need to know if you pick up this airplane to get it up into the air, do a quick little VFR flight, put her around, and come back to land safely with a relative competence. So let's hop into the cockpit and get it all started. We are in a fully cold and dark state with wheel chocks and all of our different things on the airplane right now. So let's go get it started. All right, so we're in the airplane. If you need to bring up the tablet, if it's not showing for some reason, click on the pillar here. Right now we just have the door open and all of our covers on. We are going to configure our payload real quick. We want to basically just run with front right. So this is someone in the cockpit with you. So if you want to see the person too, you can unhide avatars. I like hidden avatars, because that's kind of what I'm used to flying with, but who knows. And for procedures today, we're going to be following basically just straight up what comes in the Milviz 310R user guide. It's included in your documentation. If you drill down into your community folder install, there's a documentation file in there, user guide, or documentation folder, user guide file. And in that, it has a section called normal procedures, section 4. And that's what we will be following today. The other thing to note, this is how we're setting up the airplane for today. This is our owned Cessna November 22 Victor. This is an owned airplane. We're going to use the radio nav for now, but you can use whatever you want, and it'll just change how you're programming your flight plan and everything. We do have individualization on, systems realism, wear and tear, and engine realism on with rarely failures. So that is, as far as I am aware, the most realistic setting for failures. And services, we're going to keep with 50% fuel. That's what we should normally load out with. So that should be just fine for us. And again, this isn't going to drill too deeply into setting cruise power, flying approaches, doing IFR navigation. This is really, again, just a quick video to help you get up to speed and fly a VFR flight in the 310R. So let's get started. Control, we'll take off all our covers, make sure we're good to go. We're going to do cockpit pre-flight now. So control lock off. You can also click down there to take off the control lock. Make sure parking brake is set, so pull out. So this will be pulled out. All switches should be off. So I just basically work left to right and make sure all these switches are down. If you have a rented airplane, that will be particularly important because they could be set in random positions. Gears down. All this is good. I like to close all these up too. Fans off. Everything over here is off. And do we have fuel on? We have fuel set to, it looks like, the mains, which is okay for now. All circuit breakers also in. We don't want to see any red. Fire extinguisher is on board. Not really a big one. Set your amp meter, your voltmeter to the battery so we can see if we have battery power when we start up. Making sure landing gear is down. We have the mains selected, for fuel selected, and then your trim tab. We want to basically set it to takeoff, somewhere in the takeoff range. Set by this white nub here. All right, now we can turn battery on. We will get a lot of things happening. We've got some lights on, and we can dim these red lights a little bit because it's not nighttime. Battery on, it should beep at us. And next we want to just check and make sure that our lights are working. So we'll turn on our lights and make sure that they're all on and working. We don't have any burnt out bulbs or anything like that. Checking over here. That's pretty good. So we can come back and turn them off, or we can leave nav and anti-collision on just to let people know we're getting ready to start on up. Checking our fuel on board, 150 pounds in the main tanks. If we switch this switch down, that'll go to the aux, 90 pounds. That is about reasonable for half fuel in both tanks. Flaps are up for now. We'll leave them up for now. We can also test the pitot heat on for 20 seconds and then off. That's about good. Now, at this point, you can go outside, do an external inspection, make sure everything is away. You have a clear area. You took out all your covers and everything. That's a helpful thing to just pop outside and do one more quick look around. So pre-flight inspection is complete. We want to close our cabin door. You can either do it through the tablet or here and then knock it into the locked and upright position. Our control locks are removed, seatbelts adjusted and secured. Sure. Our brakes are set. Fuel selectors are selected in the main tanks. Landing gear switch is down. We've got 3 green. That's what we want to make sure. We can now start setting up our mixtures and prop. Mixtures full forward and prop RPM full forward again. If you have to bind only, I recommend binding all 3, but if you can only bind 2, mixture is probably the one you're going to adjust more in this airplane. We're going to open the throttles just about an inch. Then we're making sure all switches are off. We should technically turn the battery off at this point too. Make sure these 2 switches are off and covered. Avionics switch is off. Aux fuel pumps are off. And then we can turn battery on and our alternators. And at this point, it's also good to just do a quick check, make sure that all of our different warning lights that could possibly be turned on can turn on just by clicking on them to make sure no bulbs have burnt out. Altimeter, we should set that 2992 today here at Monterey, KMRY. We want to make sure cowl flaps are locked full open. So if you pull them out, they're closed. In is open, so we're good. Fuel quantity, again, we checked that. Cabin air, we can start setting this up. So if you look at your passenger comfort index, the cabin is cool and steady. So we could even turn on just a smidge of heat temp control and just open up the cabin air just a smidge. And that should help warm them up. We want alternate air. That's down here. I have a custom view set up for the side. But these 2, we want to make sure they're in. Again, if you can pull them out and lock them, but we want them in for takeoff and landing. And then external lights as required. Again, anti-collision light and nav light for now while we're starting our engines. So that's before start checklist complete. We can turn this knob up. This is the radio knob will also adjust your tablet. So we can open up this window and give a good virtual clear prop to everybody around us. And then magneto switches. So we're going to start the left engine first. Magnetos left and right for the left engine on. We have mixture full forward, props full forward, throttle open an inch. And then to start, we're going to go primer switch to the left and press and hold. We should hear it turn over. We should see this gauge come to life. Once that's on, we can turn the fuel pump, aux pump to low. And then we're going to aim for, again, between 800 and 1,000 RPM. That's pretty much where it'll naturally sit where you're at here. Same thing for the right engine. Right magnetos on. Prime to right. Right starter. Should see the gauge come to life, and aux pump can go to low. Check with the Mark 1 eyeball too, make sure that that's actually spinning, and it is. So last checks we can do. Just go through here. Alternator should be not 0. Battery, we're not really pulling anything off the battery right now because everything's being supplied by the alternators. And that's total voltage. So we are all set. That is the end of starting engines. So before taxi, our passenger briefing. We are going to basically taxi out at Monterey here. We're going to probably go runway 10, probably 10 right here. And we'll just take off and head out to the north a little bit to the practice area. We'll do a little bit of practice. Turning and climbing and descending and all that. And then we'll come back in for runway 10 right. We'll just taxi out to the left here on Alpha. And that's the threshold right there. So at this point, avionics master switch can come on. Now would be the time you program your flight plan, or you can do that stopped and with the avionics on beforehand if you want it to be that. We want to squawk VFR, so 1200, and we'll go ahead and turn it on. And again, we're turning on our cabin heater so the cabin's comfortable but warming slowly, so we can even turn the temp control down a smidge. We want to keep it comfortable. And again, it's like 50 degrees here, so we just need a little bit of heat. Now, taxiing on out, we don't need a ton of throttle, but we're going to take off the parking brake. And give a little bit of throttle to taxi on out. We'll come out here, swing up around into the runway direction, and do a quick run up here as we run the before takeoff checks. So before takeoff, we might be a little over the line. Parking brake set. Fuel quantity is good. We still got 150 pounds of main tanks. Alternate air is in. Cowl flaps are open. Elevator rudder trim set for takeoff. We are pretty much good. Elevator and rudder or aileron trim should be kind of in the center, as should rudder trim for the most part. Wing flaps are up at the moment. Avionics radios are set. We're not really worrying too much about that right now, but that would be the time. Flight instruments set. Aux fuel pumps are on low. Flight controls. Do a quick wipeout. We're free and correct. And now we can do the engine run up. So I'm going to throttle up until the RPM hits about 1700. Right about there is pretty good. And we'll just check and make sure that the alternators are in fact working still. That we have vacuum pressure. That everything is in the green here on these gauges. And then we can check our magnetos. So, like you would with the kind of key version, we can turn off the left, and we're looking for a little bit of a drop, but nothing more than 150 RPM. Turn it on, back on, and let that come back. Then we can test the right magneto on the left engine. See a little bit of a drop, but not too much. The left magneto on the right engine. Again, a little drop, but not too much. Let that come back and settle. And the right magneto on the right engine. So mixture is rich. We should take off with rich mixture. Anything below 3,000 feet and above 3,000 feet, lean it out as required. Prop, we can check feathering down to 1,200 RPM. So we'll just wipe out the prop RPM. Make sure it's still running at the low end. And when we're satisfied, bring it back up. Alright, and that's pretty much it. So we're going to turn on our landing lights on. We'll light up everything, strobes, taxi lights, everything. And get rid of this. Windows and doors closed and latched. This one's an easy one to forget if you say clear prop. So close that door and latch it. Now we are about ready for a takeoff. So for a normal takeoff, power, we're going to go full throttle, 2,700 RPM. Really the only time you should be doing that apart from landing. Mixture, we can lean for field elevation again above 3,000 feet. Above sea level, we can do that. Engine instruments, we will check, make sure everything is looking alive. We have big thing with engine instruments. We want to make sure that the two arrows are pointing in the same direction, that we don't see two different directions on any of these gauges. If we do, that's a problem. We should stop. So we're going to raise the nose wheel around 83 knots. We're going to rotate and lift off around 92 knots, and that would be at full weight. So let's go ahead and taxi on out to the runway and get ready to go. Again, off the runway, we're going to come out to the left. And another quick note, you can use flaps 15 for a maximum performance takeoff. We're not going to today, but it is an option you can do. So we're going to hold the brakes on, bring the throttle up. Once it's pretty much settled there, we can let the brakes go and we're away. And again, the red line on your airspeed indicator is going to be about 80 knots. So once you're kind of hitting that red line, 82, start pulling back on the stick. It's not going to respond immediately. And we're pretty light. If you have a bunch of people in, it'll be a lot heavier. You will feel a lot more sluggish off the runway. Positive rate, gear up. Want to make sure that the red light extinguishes once it's up. Flaps up again, and then we're going to try and we want to try and aim for a max performance takeoff for the blue line there. The other thing, start coming off of manifold pressure and RPM. We're aiming for the green, top end of the green. And we'll avoid this terrain. We'll go out into the valley and do a little bit of practice here outside of Monterey, KMRY. So we'll go ahead and climb up to about 2,000 feet per now. Again, for a cruise climb, they recommend 2,500 RPM and 24.5 inches of manifold pressure. Airspeed between 115 and 130, and then we can lean out the mixture as required. So we lean out the mixture again. We're looking for the EGT to raise up a little bit on the right-hand side, and then it'll drop again. And we just want to be a little lean at that peak. You can also look down here on your engine temperature gauge and try and maximize horsepower if you want to. So 2,500 is probably a good stopping point for now as we cruise out to the practice area. We want to keep the fuel pump low, below 12,000 feet here. Above 12,000 feet, we can turn them off. And yeah, keep your props synchronized and cow flaps open or as required. I'm still blowing through it. So again, as a brief aside, so as you're hand flying it, again, we want to make sure that we are trimming out. It is, it's a little, it can be tough to trim out just nice, especially it'll respond to some power inputs. We're aiming for about 2,500 feet. Now to activate Autopilot, it's pretty simple. We hit Autopilot button. That'll hold roll and vertical speed to 0. We can hit altitude mode. 2,600 feet is fine. And the heading will be handled by the heading bug here. So if we want to match that to our current heading, we can do that. Now we're on a heading mode. Now if we say we wanted to climb, continue our climb up to say 3,000 feet, we can use this to change our altitude, the knob over on the side, and then hit altitude, and that'll bring up vertical speed. And we can aim for something like 500 feet per minute. Should be pretty good, and it should automatically capture on this unit, the Cap 140. So we're up again, and just keeping an eye on engine gauges, making sure everything is more or less looking the same. There should be some variations, especially if you individualize the cylinders, and making sure that all of our lines are pointing the same direction. So now that we're up, we can also retract our landing lights. We can turn. We can leave everything else on. If we did need any anti-icing, you basically turn this on, your prop or heater or windshield de-ice on, and that'll start doing that. Pitot heat should also probably go on for safety. And we're about captured at 3,000 feet. Now we're in level climb, so if we do want to adjust our water line here, we can. This should be, again, adjusted in visual conditions, straight and level flight. But now I am going to take control of the airplane. Again, I have trim set to a hat switch on my joystick for both aileron and elevator trim. You may need a little bit of aileron trim. It will like to roll left. It just depends on how much fuel is in your main tanks out on the wings. So let's go ahead and start a quick left turn. To maybe a heading of 330. Fly out over the town here. And just trying to maintain altitude too. And this airplane, it's not a fighter jet. It's a little probably more sluggish in roll than some other planes. If you're used to flying the Jet Flight Arrow even, it's a little more sluggish than that. So especially when you're turning base or final, you may need to give yourself a little bit of space on the downwind. Otherwise, you're going to be turning very sharply and putting yourself in a maybe not great position. You can see we're also putting a decent airspeed in now. So we could even come back a little bit on, you know, for full pressure and prop RPM. Again, keeping everything in the green is our main goal at the moment. But you can, they include tables in the Milviz user guide for exactly what you should set for different cruise configurations and economy configurations. The important thing, keep everything in the green, and we don't want a situation where we have high manifold pressure and low RPM. All right, so let's just make another left-hand turn to 240. Again, just trying to do a good 30-degree bank and maintain altitude. Yeah, and you will find you probably need to come off the power a bit when you're in level flight, all cleaned up, and then once we get dirtied up, as we see on approach to Monterey, you may have to add a little more power than maybe you think. So we're going down a little bit now and just kind of feel it out. What did I say, 240? We're in 210. And we'll kind of fly up the coast a little bit and basically we'll enter a base to land on runway 10 right. We'll do that visually. But the other thing to keep in mind, just as a very basic thing, as you get higher up, you will have to lean out the engine, the mixture more. So it's pretty heavily biased. You've got some big movements at the top end of the range. The point is, the farther higher that you climb, the more you'll have to lean out your mixture. And again, just keep an eye on that EGT and your horsepower that you're actually creating at altitude. You have a service ceiling of 20,000 feet. It's going to climb a little bit slower, really above 12,000 feet. So if you're flying a big mountainous area, you just have to be cognizant that the higher you get, the slower you're going to climb. And this is not a turbocharged airplane. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, just doing a quick scan, making sure everything is still in the green. And we can even come back a little bit more on the power as we start to think about descending. So we're going to go ahead and descend down to... We'll go ahead and descend down to 1,500 feet. So taking off the autopilot, again, we're going to want to come back on the power quite a bit. If you just descend full power, you are going to get into the yellow a bit. You can really speed up quite a lot. This airplane is very well... airplane's pretty streamlined in the descent, so managing speed in the descent is a little tricky. Now, if I pull the power completely out, it's going to yell at me. It's saying I pulled no power, and I don't have my gear down or flaps down or anything like that. So 15 inches of mercury is really going to be your kind of low end for power. Now, our important speeds. Flaps can come out, flaps 15 below 158 knots. And gear can come out below 138 knots. So 158 and 138. If you're in the white arc, you're good to bring the flaps down and a little bit further in, gear down. And then that's pretty much it. Now, if we do need a little bit of drag, we can extend our landing lights. The other thing, if we have changed from main tanks to aux tanks, I like to put the tanks into the main tanks. Aux pumps, if they've come off of low, put them in low. Cowl flaps in, power will be set as required. Mixture, we'll have to richen it up a bit, and once we're coming in on final, we'll probably go full rich once we're low enough. Altimeter set, and that's the descent checklist. So before landing, seatbelt secure, alternate air should be checked in. Again, that's down here. Make sure it's in. Below 138 knots, landing gear can come down. We'll be looking for 3 green. The other thing I'm going to do, because I know that the heading is 010, I'm going to bug that Here I'm not using any other nav aids or anything, so we'll just look for the yellow line as we turn around and line up with the airport over there. Again, we're descending down for about 1,500 feet. And we'll just shoot a nice long approach for Monterey. So we're level off now. We got the airport in sight. If you need to bring speed down fast, you can put that flaps down now. Again, we're kind of on a long base for runway 10. We'll give it the first notch of flaps just to help us keep our speed under control. And just continue our approach. So we're now below 130, so gear can come out, and gear is going to be the very effective speed brake. Got the gear unlocked, red light, and now 3 green, so gear is down and locked. And you're going to have to bring in power now with gear down to maintain altitude. So don't get caught out by that. Keep an eye on your airspeed as you're bringing the gear out, because you will get slow if you're not careful. And we got the runway in sight. We'll make a final left turn. Once we roll out on final, we'll bring the last notch of flaps down to 35. Again, we're looking for a speed on approach of about 93 knots if we have both engines. If we have the use of both engines, 93 knots. I am pretty satisfied anywhere kind of in the ballpark of 100. We can go down 35, anywhere below 138 knots. We'll do that now because we are getting a little fast. And the other thing, just on approach, we don't want to make big throttle adjustments. If you make big throttle adjustments, you have the tendency to balloon up. So you may pull the throttle back a ways, especially if you're used to other airplanes, and then find, oh, I'm losing a lot of airspeed. I need to add a lot of power back in. Try to just do it smoothly, and that will help a lot with controlling the airplane on final. This is not an airplane that's going to float. It's not hard to land. The landing gear doesn't make it look flattering, even when you do a pretty good job. So don't feel too bad. But again, just gentle, kind of smooth operation. You'll really have to focus on timing the flare right, especially, again, if you're used to default aircraft. That's kind of one of the trickier things. We're a little bit fast. We're a little fast and just a skosh high. So I'm coming back with a little bit of power out. But again, even 93 knots is really kind of pretty fast as far as approach speeds go. If you get too slow, again, if you're approaching at 90 knots and you find yourself just hitting this in the flare, hold it off the ground, power out, and we're there. But if you find yourself riding right at 90 knots and get a little slow, the stall horn will start going off. It's a lot harder to capture. So I like to err on the fast side in this airplane. I like to err a little bit faster than slower. It's easier to bleed off that extra speed than to add a bunch of speed if you get too slow. So, welcome back to Monterey. Again, it's not a super complex airplane. We're going to come back and park up. The only thing really to note on shutdown is we're going to bring the mixtures down to stop fuel flow to the engine. You could also turn off the fuel. And then just turn all your switches off. This airplane does have persistence, so if you leave your cockpit in a mess, and especially if it's in an owned state, it'll be a mess for you the next time you see it. Otherwise, it's not really your problem. So we'll taxi on back to parking, but that is really it. That's all you need to know to get up to speed in the Milviz Cessna 310R. Again, there's quite a bit more nuance and stuff to think about with IFR and other navigation suites. There's a lot of depth to this airplane, especially with non-normal procedures and failure modes, which again you could realistically see in this airplane. So really, that's it though for this simple get up to speed in one flight VFR flight. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts about the Milviz Cessna 310R, fun places that you've flown it, drop in the comments section below. And yeah, that's pretty much it. As always, this has been VFR. Take it easy, y'all.